You Booked It, episode 183. What's going on, everyone? Thank you for joining me today on You Booked It, the #1 podcast where you learn how to create a successful entertainment career. Over the past few months, I have been working in the background putting together a little something that is pretty cool, and it is finally ready to share with you. I am excited to announce the You Booked It community. It is your go-to career resource and the only platform worldwide that covers the entire entertainment industry. From unlimited masterclasses to building industry relationships to chatting with Tony winners, Emmy nominees, and past podcast guests, the community has everything you need to navigate a successful entertainment career. Check it out for yourself. Head over to youbookeditpodcast.com/community or tap the link in the description of this episode, and we'll see you inside. And now, let's meet today's guest. Okay, let's get started. I am excited to introduce my guest today, Marc Tumminelli. Are you ready for this, Marc?
As ready as I'll ever be.
All right. Marc is the founder of New York's top training program for young actors, Broadway Workshop, as well as the nonprofit Project Broadway. Marc adapted the book, music, and lyrics, as well as directed the developmental workshop productions of the school editions for over 20 titles, including Spamalot, Addams Family, Head Over Heels, Zombie Prom, and We Will Rock You, now being licensed all over the world. Directing credits include The Marvelous Wonderettes, Sweet Charity, Bring It On, Over the Tavern, I Love My Wife, Pippin, Carrie, Legally Blonde, Xanadu, Annie, and Cabaret. As an actor, Marc has appeared as Eugene in Brighton Beach Memoirs, Biloxi Blues, and Broadway Bound at theaters across the U.S., and in Gypsy, starring Patti LuPone, directed by Lonnie Price. Marc is also the host of the popular podcast Little Me, Growing Up Broadway on the Broadway Podcast Network. Marc, that is a quick intro of who you are and what you've done, but why don't you tell us a little bit more about yourself, fill in the gaps, and a little bit more about what you do as a professional in the entertainment industry?
Well, thank you for that excellent introduction that I wrote. It's
Absolutely.
You really hit all of my highs and highs. I own, as you mentioned, Broadway Workshop, and that is the focus of what I do. I work with young performers all around the world now that we're virtual, but I've been working with performers for the last 14 years at Broadway Workshop, doing classes and camps and productions. And through that experience, it has opened up other doors, like the adaptations of the musicals you mentioned. I also have an events business where I have Broadway performers do concerts for corporate clients, and that's been really busy in the last few months. So I'm sort of a New York, not Broadway adjacent Renaissance man. So I'm not working directly on Broadway, but I work as close to it as you possibly could get.
Hey, that's amazing. I also do a lot of corporate production and things like this, and it's a crazy world.
It's a crazy world, but I'm always very grateful for any corporate job that comes into my email box.
Aren't we all?
Yes. Thank you, money. It's just like a completely different world. We from this theater world where it's like, you're trying to save every penny to put on a production or, get a guest teacher in or whatever it is. And then you're dealing with these huge corporations that have lots of money and are willing to spend it. And it's really exciting to be able to share that with some amazing theater artists who I love and I love working with and that I get to work with at that level. So it doing the events is really fun for me.
For sure. And the production level that comes with having a budget, right? It's amazing, isn't it?
Yes.
Yeah, for sure. Well, let's dig into this first section here. And Marc, look, I am a sucker for a good quote. What is your favorite quote you'd like to share with everyone?
Okay, I'm not like a super quote person, but the one that is on my corkboard over my desk is "Ride the horse in the direction it's going." And that just really sticks with me for so many reasons. When I first heard it, I was like, yes, that's it. And to me, that sort of means that, especially if you're a kid who grew up being obsessed with Broadway or obsessed with performing, sometimes doors open up that are not that. And it's so easy to block it out and say, no, I want to do this other thing that I said I wanted to do since I was 4. And the reality is that all these other opportunities might be coming your way and you're pushing them away. The direction that it feels like you should be moving, the doors that are opening for you, the people who are saying yes to you, that's where I think the gold is found. So ride the horse in the direction that it's going is my quote.
Oh, that's so good. I've not heard it before,
Oh,
but
good.
I love that. And I can absolutely attest to riding the horse in the direction that it's going, because so much of my career, I've always been the person that will just say yes to everything, but it also takes me down crazy paths that had no idea. Like next thing what did I do once that was really weird? Oh, I was created a mascot character for Rock in Rio, which is like the world's largest music festival.
Oh my God, I love it.
But it was like this $300,000 costume that I got to be part of and create and go to Rio and do all these crazy things. But that's so strange. But it's cool and it's fun, but you just keep picking up the ball and running with it. It's so good.
And people will ask you to do things that you don't know how to do. And if your gut is, yeah, I could do that, then you probably can do that or find a way to do it. And that has really been my whole life of just going by what I thought maybe I could try to figure out. And sometimes that was very hard and sometimes that was very easy. But I say yes to everything as well, which is why we're here right now, which is great.
For sure. And let's get into this next section here. And Marc, of course, you are an entertainer. I'm an entertainer. And I think that you'd agree that this industry can be one of the most subjective, brutally honest, and personally emotional industries in existence. And you know as well as I that in order to create and have a successful career in this industry like you're having now takes a lot of dedication and hard work. And while, there is an outrageous amount of fun and excitement being an entertainer, doing what we do, there are also our fair share of obstacles, challenges, and failures we are going to experience and we're going to have to move forward through. So tell us, what is one key challenge, obstacle, or failure you've experienced in your career, and how did you come out the other side better because of it?
You only want one, right? Because
I know we all have like a rap sheet of them.
When I looked at your list of questions, this can go in a million ways, but I'm going to go with the biggest one, the biggest game changer one for me, which was, you mentioned earlier that I got to do Gypsy with Patti LuPone in Chicago, directed by Lonnie Price before Broadway. And it was a really exciting experience. It was working with Patti LuPone, who I was a huge fan of, and she was so nice to me. And we just had this incredible, just thrilling experience from beginning to end. And what we thought would be the next chapter was that we were going to do Gypsy. We were going to do a mini tour, do City Center, and then do Broadway. And that was the plan. And I left that job with, I'm going to Broadway. My dreams are coming true. Like, it just felt so exciting. And the obstacle there was that Arthur Lawrence had to okay Patti LuPone playing this role in New York. I guess he had it stipulated in his will that she was never allowed to play Mama Rose. Like, they had such hate for each other for some job that she had doing a play of his that she quit during rehearsals, and he just wiped her out. And so she had to go to him and say, we want to bring our show into New York. Will you let us do it? And he said, Patty, I love you. Bygones be bygones. Let's do it, but I'm going to direct it. And so that was it. So we all thought we're fired. And then Bonnie Walker, the choreographer, called me and she said, Marc, I want you to do this show with Patty. You're great in the show. I played Yonkers. And you're going to do it. You just have to go through the paces and re-audition. I was like, of course, anything. So I start to re-audition for this City Center pre-Broadway Patti LuPone Gypsy, which I had just done 2 months earlier. And I went through that whole process. I had a work session with Arthur Lawrence. Jay Binder, the casting director, took me outside and said, go home. You're playing Yonkers. It's done. And I just had this joy, I was getting to continue this amazing process. And that following Tuesday, my agent called me and said that they did not actually have an offer for me. And it went in a different direction. And there's reasons why it went in that direction, which I won't share today, but they're so silly. Anyway, the point is, I wasn't doing it, and I was obviously devastated. And out of that devastation, I started Broadway Workshop. And that was, the reality is that I felt like, God, this business is just misery. The highs are so high, the lows are so low, I'm good, but I'm not amazing. There are so many people you watch people like Betty Buckley and you're like, you shouldn't be doing anything else on earth but this. You watch, there's so many times where you see a performer, Adrienne Warren and Tina. I'm like, I cried watching that show thinking, this is a woman who is born to do this thing that we're getting to watch right now. And I was not that. So it wasn't that difficult to give it up. I was like, this sucks. And so I had been teaching and loved doing it. And initially, I think I thought I'd do both together. And it just became very clear to me that all of my eggs should go into this basket of starting this educational theater program. And I got a lot of success from it right away. And I was making money, and I had kids that were building with the business, and I was having amazing guest teachers that were coming in. And I was like, I love this. Why wouldn't I be focusing on this? And so out of that sort of tragedy of watching the marquee go up on Broadway and not being part of that, I was building this business. And for the first year or two, I had other jobs. I was still hustling. I still did acting jobs, but then very quickly it became my whole life. And I'm very glad that I did. So that's the very long version of this story.
Oh, that's so good, though. I mean, what a devastating end to that. But also, the fact that it gave birth to what you're doing now is amazing.
And that's back to the quote, ride the horse in the direction it's going. So my horse it kept stopping and kicking me off for this thing that I thought I wanted to do. And then it just kept riding like on the beach, like gracefully for everything else. My brain was set up to be a business owner in a way that I never imagined. I certainly didn't go to school for that. All of the tragedies that come out of even owning a business, the people who say no, or the things that fall through, or the rights you didn't get to a show you wanted to produce, or those are easy things to move over and just be like, all right, what's the next thing? Where it's like being an actor is like you put all of your time and energy into sitting in that hallway at Ripley Greer so you can have your 2 minutes in the room and no one really cares. So it just felt like my effort and enthusiasm and love for the theater could be put in a much different place that was going to feed me in so many other ways. And I'm really glad that the hindsight on that was never really difficult. I never looked back and was like, oh God, what if? I was like, oh, that wasn't really what I was meant to do. There are moments where I'm like, oh God, I see something. I'd love to be in that. Or sometimes you see a great play or something really fun and you're like, God, I wish I was in that. But it's not often.
And I can imagine you get an outrageous amount of fulfillment with your school and teaching all of your kids.
It's wild. Like seeing my kids do things that I could never do. I've had about 68 kids on Broadway in the last 13 and a half years.
Wow.
And so getting to see them, people like Andrew Feldman, who has been my student since he's 7 or 8 years old, to playing Evan Hansen on Broadway at 17 was like a very exciting experience. And so many of my kids like that. Michaela Diamond, who played Cher in the Cher Show, and Rachel Reshef, who's been in 8 Broadway shows, was my student since she was 7. Ava DeMary, so many, Casey Garvin, so many amazing kids that kind of started with me and then have a lot of Broadway success. And I'm a part of that in some way. I'm not like a creepy part of that, but you started with me. I maybe got you an agent. I maybe got you that audition because casting called me and said, do you have anybody who's really like this? And I'm like, yeah, I have someone that's great. And they don't know them because they're not represented yet. They're not,
right,
in the business. So I've been able to make what I thought my dream was happen for so many other people. And that has been actually so thrilling. Sometimes because I don't have kids or anything. So I feel like that experience of that pride and true glee of getting to see someone living up to their potential.
Oh, that's so good. Thank you for sharing that. And I also think it's so important for people to hear that story about how you transitioned through the industry, because a lot of us will enter this industry thinking we grew up singing, we grew up dancing, grew up obsessed with whatever it might be. And we get into it, like you said, this is what I've been thinking since I was 4 years old, I'm going to do this. And then maybe that's not something that happens for you, or maybe it's something that could happen for you, but then you realize, you know what, I'm actually being pulled this direction, and that's totally fine. It's great to know that there are so many different avenues in this industry that you can go that can be just as fulfilling or more fulfilling than you originally thought, and to be okay with that and to embrace that?
Well, I tell my kids a lot, there are a lot of jobs in this business. I know you're sitting here right now because you're in high school or middle school or whatever, and you want to be on Broadway because that feels accessible, or you're seeing that, and now we have so much connection to Broadway performers in a way that certainly my generation did not. I had no way of DMing Judy Kuhn when I was in ninth grade. And now it's just, there's so much connection to performers. So it feels always 2 inches from who you are or wherever you're at. But they forget that there are so many other things you can do that are equally as fulfilling. And whether it, I have some kids that are like, I want to do what you're doing and teach this. And I was like, that's great. But the majority of these kids want to be stars. And then if you start thinking, oh, you have a really director mind, the way you're thinking and the way you're talking to me. Have you thought about directing? Have you thought about writing? If you thought about, oh, you love doing makeup and hair, like you could do that on Broadway. There are just so many jobs that they don't consider because they have this eye on this. I think about little kids being 4 and 5, normal kids, not theater kids. And they say, I want to be a fireman. I want to be a policeman. And they have no real idea what that means. It's just it looks cool, or they're watching a movie, or their dad is. And then by the time they're whatever age they are, they start having their own thoughts and ideas and dreams. And then they start going down that path. And only in the theater world do you make a decision when you're 4 and then clamp onto it like a dog with a bone, because you think that's this thing you want, and you don't open it up to all the things that could be possible in your life.
Yeah, really well said. And let's move on to a time that I like to call your spotlight moment. That one moment in time you realized, yes, I am going to be an entertainer for a living. Or maybe it was, yes, this is what I need to be doing in the entertainment industry. Tell us about that.
Yeah, I think that the thought of that brings me back to being a little kid, in that moment of being like, this is the most magical thing in the world. I grew up in Bayside, Queens, here in New York City. And then we moved to Long Island when I was in 5th grade. And at that point, I went to public school. And that was the first time I was ever in anything, a show really where it was singing, acting, and dancing. And I got to play like the Artful Dodger in Oliver. And I was like, this is the most exciting thing ever. And this was more like a review. We did 3 songs from Oliver. And I was just like cast as one of the Fagin's boys, but I would sing louder than everyone. And I pushed myself to the front by the piano. And they were like, why don't you sing Consider Yourself? And I was like, of course. And they're like, and you could sing, whereas I got to sing all these songs from Oliver. And that, being on stage that night, we did that show like 6 times, and it was a community theater production. And it was just like truly so thrilling. And I can remember it like it was yesterday, of being backstage with these other kids and doing the show and feeling special. And that's really what it is. It's, you feel, so many kids never feel that, where you feel like you're special. People are watching you. People think you're good at something. Like that every kid needs to experience that in some way. And so getting to experience that at 11 or whatever, or 9, was just like truly magical for me. And so that's when I knew this was going to be my life. And it's never not been. I never decided I was going to do something else. I've always been working in the theater kind of since that moment. And when I wasn't in a show, I was stage managing, or I was working backstage, or I worked in the box office. Like I did anything and everything to be in the building. But that all started there, doing the Red Stocking Review in Manor Haven, Long Island. And it's like, you have these magical moments. What was your magical child moment? Can I ask you questions?
Oh, yeah, for sure. When I first realized that I wanted to be, it would have to be, so I didn't start performing until I was late, 17 and a half, 18 years old, into the dancing. Yeah. But take that back before. So this is like a realization that I had even before. I think, you know what, that's probably not right, because I can't say that, because I will often refer to that. And I was going to say, it's like when I was listening to this Backstreet Boys album with my sisters, or it was when I saw NSYNC on Disney when they had their special. And I was like, oh, that, I want to be an entertainer. But that kind of got backburner because I was just playing sports. But I remember having that very vivid thought. And then when I started performing, I was doing dance production of The Grinch. And I remember standing in the wings, and I was a dancer. And the first dance production I'd ever gotten to do. And it was, someone had it was my sister's friend, and I was doing a pas de deux with her on the stage for this moment, and she had asked me, "Hey, we need a guy to help us lift some girls in the show. Do you want to do it?" And right before that, I had been concussed out of football. Needed elbow surgery if I would have kept playing baseball. So everything, my whole life just got flipped upside down for a handful of months, and I said, "I'll just start dancing." And I remember standing side stage with the side lighting, and I thought that was so cool. And then stepping out into stage, and the whole piece just started with this big kind of like helicopter lift thing and into a fish, and it was amazing. And like that whole pas de deux, and then that happened, and just that moment of being on stage with the first time stepping out to the lights and seeing, the semi heads that you can see in the audience without seeing any faces. And it's just that moment, I was like, oh, that was so cool. That was everything. And that's what I just kept going back for.
I mean, it's really so magical, and you cannot replace that. There's no like child experience. I guess if you're a sports star, you might replace that in some way, but there's something about being a performing young person and getting on stage and having people applaud for you. And I see that with my kids now, whether they go on to do this for a living. I have many kids that are like going to be doctors or going to be a lawyer, but they did this through high school, and it was their focus. And what a good focus to have, to like, every weekend we're in rehearsal. We do these huge main stage productions at Broadway Workshop, and getting to see these kids every weekend, Saturday and Sunday, they're with me from 2 to 8 o'clock, and they're rehearsing whatever our main stage show is. And they're all in high school. When I was in high school, I was doing that kind of similar thing, but so many kids are like smoking pot and hanging out and not doing anything that is like work related. And then we have these other kids that are like in the rehearsal studio all weekend long, hang out with their friends from their theater friends that they don't go to school with. They've created an entire community outside of the four walls of their high school. And that is, I think, sets them up for adult success in a way that nothing else does, because most people are just trapped in that high school experience. So it's just like a really special thing to be performing, staying around theater kids. It's just like a great thing to have kids be involved in if they're interested in it. If they're not, then obviously they'll be miserable. So we don't want that.
I agree with you, though. So much comes from being on stage. There's so many life skills that you really have to tackle and deal with. Just the simple fact that you're going out on stage and it's live. Something's going to happen, right? It might be what you rehearsed. It might be you forget your lines, you forget your choreo, or things happen, right? That all happens on stage at some point, right? And you have to deal with that in the moment, and to have that experience, have that live experience is so good for life.
And also the demanding of excellence as far as when we're producing a show at Broadway Workshop, I don't think of it as a kid show. We spend a lot of money on costumes and sets and all that. And my eye is on every detail to make sure it's perfect, not only for me, but for them, for the audience. That I don't want anyone to be like, that was a cute kid show. That makes me want to put my head in the oven. So I always want to make sure that we are striving for excellence from our students, but also from the production team, from me. There's no half-assing any of this. And I think that gets into your DNA, so that when you are doing the next thing, I have so many kids have started their own theater companies where they make their own YouTube videos and they do all that. And that is because they've seen from other adults that this is important and the work that we're doing is important. And so it's just, that trickle down effect is really cool.
For sure. And I guess to expand on that, it's kind of like when you go to a different level, if you will, in this industry, as you climb the ranks of quality, I guess, or whatever you want to call it. And you get to a new group of people that are kind of at a different caliber, and you are brought up to that. Or even if you go to a dance class and you're suddenly the worst person in that class, it makes you better faster, because you see that professionalism, you see the expectation of what it takes to be there, and that helps lift you to that. So yeah, the trickle down effect also is pulling people up. It's amazing.
I love it.
Yeah. And let's piggyback on that real quick, and let's talk about your number one booked it moment. Walk us through that day and the audition and callbacks, if they happen to be a part of it. What was going on in your life, and what about that moment makes it your favorite booked it moment?
I think my favorite booked it moment would be, I played Eugene in Brighton Beach Memoirs and Biloxi Blues and Broadway Bound at a bunch of theaters. But the second theater I did it at was St. Michael's Playhouse, which is in northern Vermont. It's a beautiful theater. And I had sent the artistic director a letter. And I said, I'd really like to be seen for this. I've done it 2 other times. I think that you'll like love having me in your cast. And I never heard
Yeah.
anything back from him. And I had done this same thing multiple times. For every job I ever booked, I wrote a letter to the artistic director. They would call me and say, thank you so much for your letter, come in. But this guy, Chuck Tobin, who's the artistic director of the theater, did not call me in. And a little bit, I was like, they must have someone already, because mostly people don't choose to do that show unless they already have a Eugene. And so I just went to the EPA, and I remember walking in, and he stood up and he went, Marc Tumminelli, I've been waiting for you all day. And he just had hoped I'd show up at the open call. And I was like, all right. So that put me in the right frame of mind. We just had this great session, and obviously I went back and worked with him again and the director, and they, offered me that job. And that turned into really a life-changing experience, because he'd only planned to do Brighton Beach. And I convinced him over our time doing Brighton Beach, you should keep going. We should do Biloxi Blues and Broadway Bound the next 2 summers. And so I locked myself in for a few more years, but I created this family there of all these people that have some local people, some people who would come up to work at that theater for multiple years. And I'm still going up there. So that was in 2004. And now it is 2021. And I have been up to Vermont, back to that theater to do something, whether it was present my own camp, to just visit people, to hang out. I rented a house there for the month of September. So that job really changed my life in a very different kind of way. It wasn't that, oh my God, it catapulted me to stardom. But what it did was it opened up this like huge family of people that I have because of working at that theater. And getting that job I wanted it so desperately. And it was just like the show was, they had a huge budget. The show was amazing. I got to do the series of the 3 plays in a way that I hadn't done it at any other theater. I'd done it at some other theaters where people were bad, or the set was ugly, or it was an afterthought. But this was a really special 3 years of getting to play that part there. And then I went on to play other things there as well. But that was my favorite "you booked it" moment.
Oh, that's brilliant. And I think a big takeaway from that also is the relationship side of this business, and how relationships really are everything in this industry.
Yeah, I mean, it's really so much about how you are with people. This is, I say a lot of times, like you have to be nice. And if you're not going to be nice, you better be really funny as far as who you want to spend time with. I'm fine if you're like a little sassy, if you're like hilarious, but people have to be nice. And I don't know if I've always been the nicest person at every moment and every time, but I certainly have tried to keep the spirit in the room really up, to let people know I really wanted to be there, to not be the first one to complain. I might be the 4th person to complain, but I try not to be the first one. And there are definitely people who've worked with me who, if they listen to this, would be like, that's the opposite of the experience I had with Marc. Sometimes I'm the worst person to have in the room, but that particular experience was really wonderful. But being nice to people and just saying thank you, or writing thank you notes, or being genuine makes a really big difference, I think, in so many situations. And I certainly have tried to do that when possible. I have worked at theaters where I was definitely the worst person I was a nightmare. They like couldn't wait for me to leave.
Hey, we all have our moments, but we can't, figure out how to be, it's difficult, I should say, to figure out exactly how to conduct ourselves and the best way to conduct ourselves until sometimes we mess it up a little bit. So that's part of the journey as well, isn't it?
Well, it turned out for me that like, oh, I need to be the boss. Like I'm not great at, and that's why it was very easy for me to walk away from acting, because you have no control. You don't, sometimes you can be like, oh, I really want this to happen, and manifest it and work hard to get that to happen, or that audition to come up. But mostly you have no control over anything. If in this other version of my life, I can create opportunities. Like, I love that show, I want to direct it. Let me find a way to produce it. Or I really want this to happen, or I really want to be working with these kinds of people, or let me ask this person to teach with me. And so I have the opportunities to create things that I'm really excited about. Whereas an actor, you don't really get to do that. And I'm not great at maybe taking direction. So it's better for me to be the director.
Beautiful.
Yes.
Hey, and then you know your path, and that's it. And that's perfect.
Yeah.
Great. Let's take a moment to talk about the present. What projects are you working on now? What are you looking forward to? And it's a crazy time still. We're amidst this global pandemic. How do you see the entertainment industry moving forward in the next couple of years?
At least for us at Broadway Workshop, it's really tricky because We've moved all of our classes virtually, and we've had a lot of success in that. And not only were we used to only be able to work with kids who would be in the tri-state area and come into New York
Mm.
City, whether that meant they were coming in for the summer intensives or they were coming in from Boston for a weekend. And some parents would fly their kids in to do a class. But mostly you had to get to Ripley Grier Studios to take class. And so since we moved things virtually, now we have kids from all over the world. We will do a class and there'll be a girl from Shanghai, a guy from Bangladesh. Like, it blows my mind that I'm like, what time is it there? And it's like 4 a.m., but I really wanted to take Sierra Bogus's workshop. And so there are kids coming from all over the world now because we're virtual. So I do think that won't change. I think we'll continue to offer virtual classes because it's just easier, and we are able to present really strong classes virtually. We keep the class size really small. We keep the price low so that it's accessible to everybody. So that is a really cool thing that's come out of this. And I think that will continue to change. Being 100,000% honest with you, virtual productions are not my favorite thing. I don't think it can possibly check the box that being in a live theater does. And so for us, we are doing some virtual productions and things that are set to work on Zoom, or things that we can film remotely and put together as a movie. So we are doing some of that. And I'm looking at some new titles to do in the spring like that. But we will get back on stage probably a year from now is what I'm imagining.
Yeah.
And we'll come back to doing some big productions. We were right in the middle. We were about to start teching our main stage production of Chicago. And only yesterday did I put all of the costumes into storage, because I was like, oh, we're never doing this. And I had boxes and boxes of clothes that were made or ordered for our production of Chicago. So that is now on the shelf probably for another few years, and then we'll try to do it again. So I'm excited to do big musicals again as soon as we can. Right now, we are just doing our virtual productions and classes, and summer's a really hard thing to figure out because I don't know if people are going to be traveling when we're talking about August 2021. So we're planning 7 virtual programs and 3 live programs right now, and they're selling very well, and people want to do that. So those are the things that are happening now. I'm writing some things that I'm excited about for some of the licensing companies that might be live programs, might be virtual productions. We'll see how long this all goes on. But that's I don't have an answer, but we're doing lots of things. I'm very busy.
Yeah, very cool. Yeah. It sounds like it. And that's brilliant that you've embraced all of the virtual side of things, even if it's not necessarily the most ideal in all regards. But it's great that you have a greater reach now as well, which is fantastic.
I also have 2 full-time employees that their job is to figure out where we're going and what we create next. And they are instrumental in figuring out like what we should do, and let's try this and see if it works. And let's try this. We started doing these Broadway days, and for $30, we do a dance class and we bring together the stars or the original stars of a show to come back and just do a Q&A. So we are getting 30 or 40 kids, high school and middle school kids, on Zoom for an hour and a half to do a movement class, and then talk to the original stars of Newsies after they had a Newsies dance class. And we're bringing back some old shows, and they're selling like crazy because it's a really great low cost opportunity to do something fun, interactive, that is only 1 hour and a half long, and you're not stuck on Zoom all day. Because I have Zoom fatigue, you have Zoom fatigue, everyone has Zoom fatigue. So if I can't create an opportunity for a young person to be excited for 90 minutes on Zoom, then I'm not doing it. And that is just where my standard is, as far as I don't want it to be another time suck or eyes water experience. I want small classes where everyone gets to do a lot, or big classes where big groups are doing a lot. That's how we are navigating this Zoom online class world.
Yeah, very cool. Love it. And it is time to move on to one of my favorite sections in the interview. I call it the Grease Lightning Round.
Ooh.
I am going to ask you a handful of questions. I want you to answer them as quickly and concisely as possible, one after another. Are you ready?
I am.
All right, first question. What was the one thing holding you back from committing to a career as an entertainer?
Money.
Second question. What is the best piece of advice you have ever received?
Your mother says you can't unring a bell, and she is so right, and that is the best advice.
Can you explain that a little bit
Yeah, you
more?
can't unring a bell. So, once you've done something, you've done it and you have to keep moving on. So, if it's something you regret, well, say you're sorry and move on with it. Or if it's something you created and it didn't go well, how are you going to make it better the next time? You cannot go back in time and fix things that are done. So, think on that one.
Yeah, beautiful. And the third question, what is something that is working for you right now? Or if you'd like to go pre-COVID, what was working for you before our industry went on pause?
What is working for me right now? I think saying yes to things is working for me now, and it worked for me then, and it seems to be working for me. And it's just when you get an opportunity or someone asks you to come on their podcast, as a podcaster myself, I always say yes to that. Obviously, you say yes to anything that comes up. And that feels right to you. Obviously, you're not going to say yes to going to Indonesia for $150 to teach a math workshop. That's not going to be something I'm going to do. But I'm going to say yes to anything that feels fun and right and could be exciting, even if it's a little scary.
Yeah, great. And the fourth question, what is your best resource, whether that is a book, a movie, a YouTube video, maybe a podcast or piece of technology you found is helping your career right now?
My best resource, I would say, is a little wonderful gem called YouTube. And I don't
Yeah.
know how we ever lived without it. It is such a great way to see how other people do things, how not to steal it, but to say, oh, that's an interesting way to do stuff. And I'm going to do it differently. Yesterday, I was like, oh, I want to start doing this different thing with my podcast. And so I don't use GarageBand. I don't know how, but I watched a YouTube tutorial for 8 minutes and now I know exactly how to do that. So it's just for me, I'm a visual person. I like to see things. I like
Hmm.
to watch how someone else does something and then figure out what my interpretation of that is. I would say YouTube is a wonderful tool. It's also a really, as much as we shouldn't be saying bootlegs are good, but I spent this past weekend doing a Betty Buckley Sunset Boulevard deep dive. And I was like, God, that performance was thrilling. And there's no way I would have been able to see it had that not existed. That I'm loving a YouTube moment.
Beautiful. And the fifth question, if you had to start your career from scratch, but you still had all the knowledge and experience you've collected from your career in this industry, what would you do or not do? Would you do anything differently or
Yeah,
would you keep it the same?
I would have taken class. I was so afraid of acting class, of dance class, of looking bad. I was so afraid of looking like the worst at something. And in the reality of that, it's the stupidest thing. And it just totally held me back from being a better actor, singer, dancer. I did not want to ever take class. So I didn't. So I feared it. And I would see a class and I'd be like, oh, I want to take that. But the fear of that would keep me from doing it. And now I'm an educator and all I do is teach class and teach people to act and teach people how to be better. And it's so mind boggling that I was so afraid of this thing that is truly so wonderful and helpful. And you learn so much by watching other people and you
Mm.
learn so much about being vulnerable and by putting yourself in vulnerable situations. But I had this fear of being bad. So if I had to go back, I would get myself in class. I would not have feared it. And I don't know what that would have meant for my career. It may mean I would right back where I am right now, which is being a better teacher because I took those classes or being a better performer and I would have done that longer. Who knows? But I do wish if I had gone back in time, I would have been in every class that I could have managed.
Yes, for sure. And the last question, what is the golden nugget knowledge drop you've learned from your successful career in this industry you'd like to leave with our listeners?
Be nice when you can, advocate for yourself, don't let people walk all over you, and be educated about the thing that you want to do. So if you want to be a director, you better see theater, you better read plays. If you want to be a performer, you better know songs. When I have a student or someone comes to me and they're like, want all of these things out of life and they know 4 songs and they're from 13 and Les Mis and Waitress. I'm like, you've done no work. So my suggestion is do the work, dive in and be a student of the theater, be a student of the thing. If you're going to make wigs, you better study the best possible ways to do that and learn from the best and watch the YouTube tutorials and listen to the podcast about it, but become an expert in your field.
Yes, do the work.
Yes.
And to wrap up this interview, Marc, it is time to give yourself a plug. Where can we
Ooh.
find you? How do our listeners connect with you? Is there anything you want to promote?
Yeah, we're promote, always hustle. Follow me on Instagram at Marc Tumminelli, MarcTuminelli. But you can also listen to my podcast, Little Me Growing Up Broadway, for the Broadway Podcast Network. We've been releasing episodes since March of 2020, and it's been really exciting. We have 30 episodes that are running now, and we're releasing weekly, and it's such a blast to do. I talk to past Broadway stars that had a lot of success as kids and current young people who are working in the industry. And we talk about, what it's like to have that level of success as a kid, either looking back at it as an adult or being in the middle of it now. And it's like a really interesting thing to hear what people say about that time, being a 15-year-old starring in a Broadway show. What a weird thing to do. And so hearing those stories is really interesting. So you could check out the Little Me podcast and follow Little Me at Little Me Podcast on Instagram. You can go to BroadwayWorkshop.com, get on the mailing list, or you can go to our Instagram at Broadway Workshop and get on the mailing list to find out what's going on with classes, workshops, camps, intensives, productions, coachings. We do it all, and we do it with truly the best teaching artists in the world. And I'm so proud of the work that Broadway Workshop has done and will continue to do for the kids who love theater in a really safe, wonderful, fun, and challenging environment.
Beautiful. And for everyone listening out there, I have put the links to everything Marc has just said into the description of this episode so you can easily connect with him. And also be sure to share this podcast with your fellow entertainers, coaches, teachers, arts and entertainment educators, and anyone you know aspiring to create a career in this industry. You Booked It is the #1 resource of expertise on how to actually create a successful entertainment career. Case in point, everything Marc just talked about today in the episode, all those amazing golden nuggets. If you liked this episode, make sure you hit that subscribe button so you don't miss the next guest. Marc, thank you so much for coming on. Thank you for saying yes. It's been such a pleasure to have you on.
Such a dream. Dane, thank you so much. And I can't wait to hear more of your podcast.
Thank you so much for listening today. If you enjoyed this episode and want more like it, be sure to smash that subscribe button. Also, be sure to jump inside the brand new You Booked It community. Head over to youbookeditpodcast.com/community or tap the link in the show notes right now and take your career to the next level. Inside, you'll connect with your people and develop real industry relationships, which, by the way, this podcast has discovered is the #1 fundamental that creates long-term career success. Discover opportunities and join in on over 20 upcoming live masterclasses. Tap the link in the description of this episode, and I'll see you there.